I nodded, finally starting to understand. When the retina becomes damaged, such as those that have undergone macular degeneration, those signals become warped and jumbled. Dr. Harper went on. The brain still receives them, so it does its job, translating these distorted signals into an image. It kind of fills in the gaps for you. Sometimes it fills these gaps with colors, patterns, creatures, and places that aren't present. And this is called Charles Bonnet syndrome. I nearly wept with relief. So I'm not mad. I cried. Not at all. The doctor replied, this is an entirely physical condition. Your mind is in full working order. If you were suffering any form of mental illness, your delusions wouldn't be limited to just the one sense. You'd hear these interlopers, smell them, even feel them. This is a condition solely related to your eyes, not your brain. As I left Dr. Harper's office, I felt as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Sure, my vision was still an issue, but now I knew it was only a problem with my eyes, not my mind. I knew I could handle the situation. I was ready to face the world again. Since then, I've seen plenty of weird visions. I saw a huge waterfall in the park, complete with a hazy mist and butterflies flitting about it. I saw a Native American warrior, complete with a huge feather headdress, sitting at a stool at the counter in the coffee shop. I saw an intricate and quite impossible structure of scaffolding crisscrossing the entire front of my apartment block. Hell, on the 4th of July last year, I even saw a great swooping green dragon in the sky, twisting and cavorting through the air overhead. All looked utterly and completely real. Yet, now I knew they were simply tricks of the eye. They were no longer disturbing. In fact, I actually came to quite enjoy them, even looking at them as unique and entertaining little shows or works of art that existed purely for my pleasure and nobody else's. I came to welcome them. Then, a month ago, I saw her. It was nighttime. It's always nighttime when I see her, and I was just getting ready for bed. I walked into the kitchen to get myself a glass of water and actually cried out in alarm when I spotted the figure in the corner. She was tall, by far the tallest woman I'd ever seen, and even though she stood hunched, she still had at least 6 inches on me. I was used to seeing characters in dated and bizarre dress, but this was different somehow. It didn't seem like an outfit from any one time, instead a bizarre mishmash of items. She wore a tuxedo jacket, figure-hugging and black, tailored to the female body shape, over a dirty old ruffled dress shirt. To complete the ensemble, she wore a bright red bow tie. On her hands, which she held out to either side as if shrugging, or maybe feeling for rain, she wore dirty white gloves. Her fingers were disproportionately long, almost spidery, and occasionally they twitched, as if she longed to grip and squeeze something in them. On her lower half, she wore shorts the same crimson as her bow tie, over opaque black nylons. Her legs were long, lithe, attractive, if the truth be told, the legs of a dancer. She also wore red heels, the same hue as her shorts and bow tie, but they sparkled and shimmered, bringing to mind Judy Garland's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. As strange as this ensemble was, I couldn't tear my eyes from her face. Most of it was obscured by a jaunty bowler hat, tipped and tilted to hide her eyes and nose, but beneath the brim of her hat I could see the deathly pale skin of her face and a grin that sent shivers down my spine. It was wide, too wide, with entirely too many teeth. A smile is meant to be an expression of warmth. It's meant to feel welcoming and benevolent. But the look on this woman's face oozed malice, It felt much like the sort of glee I'd expect from a snake as it corners a rat. However, the thing that startled me most was that she had a third arm sprouting from her back, curled up and over her head like a scorpion's tail. It was longer than any arm should be, and the hand only had 3 fingers, like a claw. It was pointed straight at me, and as I swore in dismay and stumbled sideways, it seemed to track my movement. I stood staring at the creepy figure for a few seconds, trying to get my head around the situation. She just stood there in the corner, grinning back. Finally, I realized that this was just another of my hallucinations and breathed an audible sigh of relief. One of the tricks I've picked up over the months of suffering with Charles Bonnet syndrome is to break the line of vision toward whichever stimulus is causing my brain to interpret the images into the hallucination. Think of it like restarting a faulty computer, how refreshing the system debugs it. To this end, I close my eyes and count to 5. Then when I reopen them, the hallucination is gone. So as I stared at the horrifying, malformed figure in my kitchen, I knew that to make the image go away, I simply had to close my eyes. I'll be honest here. When I counted to 5, I hesitated a little before opening my eyes. If I'd opened my eyes and she'd still been stood there, smiling that wicked smile at me, I think I might have had a heart attack. She wasn't, and I breathed another long sigh of relief, fetched my glass of water, and went back to bed. The tall woman haunted my thoughts in the days after I saw her. She was different to the other visions I'd had. Somehow she felt more real. It was this agitation that my buddy Jason picked up on when we met for lunch the following Friday. Jason was one of those same friends I'd tried to drive away shortly after I lost my vision, yet he'd refused to give up on me, continuing to get in touch week after week. Good friends are hard to come by, but great friends, the ones who will be by your side for life, are even rarer. Jason, God bless his kind heart, is one of the latter. "You've got to tell me what's going on, dude," he said, as we sat down over pizza. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to brush it off. "You're so distracted. It's like you're looking for something in here all the time. You've eaten like 1 slice in pizza in the time it's taken me to eat 4. So I repeat, you've got to tell me what's going on," Jason said, waving a slice of pizza around for emphasis. "It's nothing," I replied, feeling a little stupid. "I just had a hallucination a couple of nights ago that really got to me." "I thought you were cool with those now," he asked, putting the pizza slice down. "Yeah, I am. I mean, I was, but this was different," I replied, resigned to talking about it. "She scared me." "She?" Jason asked, his interest clearly piqued. "Tell me about it." So I did. I described the tall woman and how she'd appeared to me. I explained that unlike any of my other hallucinations, she felt more real, and that she was the first to feature such a weird and unsettling mutation. Sure, I'd seen smaller versions of people in the past, a phenomenon referred to as Lilliputian by medical professionals, but the extra appendage and impossibly distorted face were something I had yet to encounter thus far. I think it was that, combined with the unnerving expectant stance, that had disturbed me the most. "So, Jason said after I'd finished, "you say she had great legs? Shut up, you asshole." I laughed, throwing my napkin at him. "No, seriously, I get it, man," Jason replied, passing the napkin back to me. "If I walked into a room and a giant mutant was waiting for me, it'd scare the shit out of me too. But you know what caused you to see this? It's like the coachman in that waterfall you saw. It's a condition that you know you have, and it's one that you know how to deal with. Okay, I know, I know, I replied. Thanks, man, you're right. I did feel better too, so I smiled at him, took a big bite of my pizza, and changed the subject, asking him about his psycho ex, a conversation he was all too happy to dive into. The next time I saw the tall woman, just under a week later, I was brushing my teeth. I was stood at the wash basin, brushing away, when I spotted a figure in the mirror. She was out in the dark hallway, peeking around the door behind me. That same sinister grin I'd seen before stretched her narrow face into a distorted grimace, the dirty bowler hat pushed down over her eyes once again. Each of those 3 long spidery hands gripped the doorframe. As crazy as this sounds, it felt like she was trying to avoid being spotted. I cried out, spitting toothpaste foam all over the mirror, my toothbrush clattering into the basin. I spun around, my heart thumping in my chest, my breathing ragged in my throat. She wasn't there, of course she wasn't. The doorway was empty. I tiptoed forward, hesitantly, trying to look around the doorframe into the hallway without actually sticking my neck out into its shadowy confines. The seconds ticked by as I drew closer and closer. I couldn't see anything, so, finally, with a whisper of self-affirmation, I stepped out of the bathroom. The hallway was empty, as was the rest of my apartment. I was shaken again. This was the first time I'd seen a hallucination in a reflection, and I wasn't even sure that I'd actually seen it. Now, as I sit here writing this, knowing what would follow, I think I thought like that to try to protect myself, to shield myself from the truth. I was an idiot. A full fortnight passed without incident. Sure, I saw a flash of color one day, a dancing yellow lightning bolt that zigzagged back and forth on the street outside my apartment, but that was exactly the sort of thing I'd come to expect from my condition. It was exciting, otherworldly, but it wasn't scary, not like she was. In retrospect, that fortnight was blissful. It was a reminder of what life could be like, the existence that I'd carved out for myself since my diagnosis. Life was good. The night that changed the way I viewed the tall woman. Last night I'd been out and had a couple of drinks. I'd met the other guys with visual impairment for dinner, and we'd ended up at a bar afterwards. I wasn't hammered, but we got through plenty of beer between us, and by the time I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt decidedly lightheaded. It took me a while to make it home, laughing and talking to a couple of the other guys from our group as we strolled along. It had been a great evening. It's probably the last truly good one I'll ever have. I bid the other guys goodnight and, fumbling with my key, let myself in. With swaying steps, I strolled into my hallway, slamming the door a little too loudly behind me. I took off my jacket, hung it on the hook by the door, then hit the light switch. She was waiting at the end of the hallway, all 3 hands held aloft into claws, reaching for me, that same maddening, malevolent grin on her pale face. I swore again, louder than ever, actually jumping back a step, recoiling from the impossibly tall and terrifying figure lying in wait in my own home. The tall woman didn't move. She just stood there, staring and smiling at me. I stared back, but I sure as hell didn't smile. Jesus Christ. I muttered under my breath. You know how you can feel a little paranoid after a few beers? That feeling of non-specific post-alcohol dread. Imagine that combined with a giant grinning mutant woman suddenly appearing in your home. Suffice it to say, it was very, very, very uncool. I don't need this. I sighed and closed my eyes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I opened my eyes, her face was just a foot from my own, grinning wider than ever. She dashed the length of the hallway and was now stood so close that her long, grasping arms were either side of me, her fingers twitching and clawing at the air around my face. I could see her chest heaving, as if she were actually laughing silently at my attempts to dismiss her. As if the thought that I could ever be free of her was amusing. I screamed, a full-bodied shriek of terror, and actually dropped to my knees, covering my head as if to fend off an expected blow. It never came. Finally, I lowered my hands, gasping for breath, shaking. The hallway was empty, the tall woman nowhere to be seen. I stayed there on my knees for a moment, gasping for breath. Then I was on my feet, and I turned and ran, out of the apartment, out of the building, and into the street. I stood there, shivering, terrified beyond reason, without a clue as to what I'd do next. Finally, I pulled my phone from my pocket, and I made a phone call. "Hey, Andy, what's up?" Jason asked. "Jason, I need you to come here," I said, sobbing. Jason didn't ask why, didn't complain. Instead, he simply replied, "I'm on my way." Less than 20 minutes later, his car pulled up outside, and he dashed over to the steps outside my building where I was sitting, shivering. He threw his jacket around my shoulders and asked what happened, his voice filled with concern. "She's in there," I stammered. "Oh," the tall woman, "she's back." Okay, he said, gently helping me to my feet. "Come on, man, let's go in there and check it out." I wish I could say that I was brave when we went inside, but I'd be lying. I cowered behind Jason, one hand on his shoulder, as we made our way through my home. Of course, we didn't find a thing. We're talking a giant mutant woman in a poky little one-bed apartment. Where the hell was she going to hide? Finally, after we'd checked every single room twice, I had to admit that she was gone. "I'm so sorry, man." I apologized, feeling genuinely stupid. "I got scared and..." "I'm sorry, man." "Hey, forget about it, buddy," Jason said. "So I'm here now. Where do you keep your booze?" Half a bottle of bourbon later, we were both feeling pretty talkative. "She's, just kind of different, I tried to explain. I get it, he said. It's like you saw something bad and you feel bad, and that's bad." He didn't get it. "No, she's different, I explained. "I've never had a repeat hallucination before. And they've never been scary, She's not like the others." "Dude," Jason said, taking another sip of bourbon, "and you've got like Charlie Boney syndrome, and that makes you see shit, so." He waved his hands in the air like a magician who'd just performed a trick. I know, I replied. "And no, listen, Andy," he said. It makes you see shit. It's just your eyes, yeah? You didn't hear anything. You didn't feel anything. This is how that stuff goes. It's your eyes, and I know it's scary, man, but you've been through like hell and high water in your life so far. You're tough, one of the toughest, bravest guys I know, and you can handle some creepy hallucination, bitch." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "She is a very creepy hallucination bitch though, dude." He laughed too, and we both took a drink. You know, that could help, he said finally, his voice thoughtful. What? Drinking? I asked. Oh, what? No. Well, yes, it does, he giggled. I mean, like, demystifying her. You should give her a name. Something stupid, so she's not scary. I've got to say that as much as I like creepy hallucination, bitch, that's a bit of a mouthful. I laughed. Yeah, I get that, he replied. Suddenly something he'd said came back to me. How about Helen? I suggested. Helen Highwater. Awesome, he said, then raised his glass. Here's to Helen, buddy. To Helen. I smiled and drained my glass. Jason spent the night on my sofa, mainly because he'd had too much to drink to even think about getting behind the wheel of a vehicle. But honestly, I think the reason he drank so much was so he'd have an excuse to stay and keep an eye on me. I'm glad he did. Knowing that he was there made me feel safer, and I was able to get some sleep. It gave me a sense of security to know that if the strange vision I'd just christened Helen was to appear again, I'd be able to call on him for support. This morning, we both needed support. It feels like a mule kicked me in the head. He groaned when I made my way into the living room. Yep, I replied, my own head thumping. Joe's. Joe's, he replied firmly, and staggered to his feet. As we drank strong black coffee and ate muffins, we didn't talk much. Finally, Jason broke the silence. So, you feel cool now? He asked, his mouth still full of blueberry muffin. I nodded. Yeah, I think so. Not still freaked out about you-know-who? He asked. Hey, Helen. Hey, I replied with a smile. No, I really don't think I am. I reckon I can handle some creepy hallucination, bitch. Good. He laughed, giving me a hearty pat on the back. That's cool, man. I bet you can. Now, after a night spent cowering in my bathroom, too scared to go out into my apartment, I know we were both wrong. About everything. Remember how earlier I told you that the thought of being institutionalized, that the very idea of losing my grasp on reality was the most terrifying thing I could imagine? Now I'd welcome that, because the alternative is far, far worse. After breakfast, I said goodbye to Jason, and he climbed into his car and drove away. The day passed without incident, and when Lois stopped by this afternoon, she even commented on how upbeat I seemed. You got a lady in your life? She asked, casually. I laughed at that, wondered what she'd think if she knew the truth. Yeah. I chuckled. Something like that. Good for you. She sniffed. You make sure you treat her right. That tickled me even more, and I had to bite my lip. Sure. I replied, why, I'll do my best. Tonight, still a little wiped from the exertions of the previous evening, I decided to turn in early. I brushed my teeth, washed my hands and face, and got changed. Finally, I fetched a glass of water and walked into my bedroom. I climbed into bed and instantly felt so relaxed. Within mere seconds, I was ready for sleep. That sudden, overwhelming drowsiness that comes when you've spent a whole day keeping sleep at bay. I decided that resistance was futile and sat up to switch off the light. I nearly didn't see her, but as I reached for the switch, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. My heart leapt into my throat as I turned to the foot of my bed. The tall woman was crouching there, her grinning face staring at me from just beyond my feet. So many teeth. Her long, slender fingers spread out over my blankets, twitching slightly as she gripped the end of the bed. Slowly, excruciatingly so, her third misshapen arm came into view over her shoulder, joining her other hands on my bedding. I froze, utterly petrified. I was at a crossroads here, arriving at a pivotal moment that had been coming for some time. She watched me, grinning, as if she was waiting to see what I'd do, cruel amusement flickering across her pale face. But this time I'd had enough. "You don't scare me anymore," I said, my voice filled with defiance and anger. "I'm not letting you do this to me." I reached across to the light switch. "Good night, Helen," I said triumphantly, then flicked it, plunging the room into darkness. I laid there, a sense of tremendous pride surging through me, and I grinned to myself in my warm, comfortable bed, overjoyed at the emotional victory of overcoming my own fear. And then it happened. The thing that led me here, something that turned my blood to ice water, my bowels to jelly. "Good night, Andrew." Her rasping voice hissed from the darkness.